Just from that one experience, she was a totally different driver. I mean, it really made her mature.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm looking for.
Right.
Good morning. I think we have a quorum, so we're gonna get ready to start. So good morning and welcome to the March 15th, 2024 SANDAG Transportation Committee meeting. And I will now call the meeting to order. And before we move forward, I'd like to ask our interpreter to let us know how to access the interpretation.
To use the interpretation feature, please scroll to the bottom of the Zoom screen where the meeting controls are. Click on the interpretation icon, the world, and select English as your language. If you are joining through the Zoom mobile app, cell phone, tablet, etc., please press the ellipsis, then interpretation, and then choose your language. Finally, click on mute original audio to not hear the original Spanish low in the background. Headsets are available for interpretation. If you are in the meeting room, please check out a headset from the receptionist in the lobby. Para hacer uso del servicio de interpretación, favor de desplazarse a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom, donde aparecen los controls. Haga clic en el icono de interpretación, es decir, el globo terráqueo, y seleccione Spanish, español. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom, celular, tableta, etc., presione los puntos suspensivos, luego interpretación y luego el idioma. Si no desea escuchar el audio original en inglés en el fondo, por favor seleccione Mute Original Audio, silenciar el audio original. Contamos con auriculares disponibles para el servicio de interpretación. Si se encuentra en la sala de la reunión, favor de pedir auriculares con la recepcionista en el vestíbulo. Thank you.
Thank you. So for today, just before we have a roll call, I just want to note that Vice Chair Mayor Krantz is not present today, and he's attending a conference, and we have Councilmember Zito as the alternate sitting in his place and serving as the Vice Chair. We also have Councilmember Raul Campillo attending via Zoom. And today is also the first day that our new CEO for NCTD, Sean Donahue, here. Donaghy, I'm sorry. So Sean Donaghy this is your first meeting. So before we get started, I thought, Sean, you might want to say a few words.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just would like to say, it's an honor to be in the region. I know there's a lot of great projects that are happening really across the board throughout the county, especially in North County and down into the city. So I want to say thanks to Chair Edson and our board for really giving us the direction that we have at North County Transit District, and appreciate the work that's being done on this committee. One of the things that I think drew me to the area was the potential for public transit within the region and the work that the Transportation Committee is doing here at SANDAG. So I just wanted to say thank you for that and appreciate the welcome.
Well, welcome. Next, we'll go ahead and have our clerk, Francisco Webb, to confirm that we have a quorum with a roll call of attendance, and ask Council Members Campillo to confirm information regarding remote participation.
Thank you, Chair. I'll go ahead and start with the remote participation for Councilmember Campillo. Councilmember, if you could just state briefly the reason for your virtual participation without disclosing any personal medical information.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Clerk. I'm notifying the committee I'm attending today's meeting remotely due to just cause related to child care needs and pursuant to the Brown Act. I will also disclose there's no individuals over the age of 18 present in this room with me. If I will update that disclosure as if it changes during the course of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. And can you also confirm for us that you'll be able to leave your camera on throughout the meeting? It's fine to mute your microphone, but just have your camera on.
Yeah. Camera will be on. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'll go ahead and do a roll call now. For the San Diego County Regional Airport Authority, Rafael Perez.
Here.
For the City of San Diego, Councilmember Campillo.
Here.
For the County of San Diego, Supervisor Montgomery Stepp.
Here.
And Supervisor Anderson.
Here.
For East County, Chair Shu.
Here.
For Metropolitan Transit System, Councilmember Moreno.
Present.
For North County Coastal, Councilmember Zito.
Present.
For North County Inland, Councilmember Musgrove.
Here.
For North County Transit District, Deputy Mayor Edson.
Present.
And for the Port of San Diego, Job Nelson.
Here.
And South County is absent today. That does complete the roll call, and we do have a quorum.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and take public comments, and for today, we'll go for 2 minutes, be consistent to similar meetings in the past. As a reminder, though, no comments shall be allowed, threatening, profane, or abusive language that disrupts the orderly conduct of the meeting will be tolerated. Any such language or other disorderly conduct that disrupts, disturbs, or otherwise impedes the orderly conduct of the committee meeting is prohibited. Per SANDAG board policy, the amount of time allowed for each verbal public comment is determined based on the number of agenda items, the complexity of those items, and the number of persons anticipating to offer comments. This allows us to hear from as many people as possible and to complete our business while we still have a quorum. Based on those factors for today, the meeting, each member of the public will be allowed 2 minutes for their comments. So, Ms. Francesca, do we have any members of the public that have general comments?
Thank you, Chair. I do see 2 hands from the public. We'll start with Blair Beekman and then go to the original draw.
Hi, thank you, Blair Beekman. Thank you for the meeting today. I wanted to thank yourselves that just as a SANDAG body and board with your public meetings, I've learned a process to really address the future, the current concepts of war going on in Israel and Ukraine. With what's been happening in Israel, I've got the feeling and vibe from SANDAG board persons that there can be ways that we can practice ideas of peace here at the local level as war is going on. And as we practice, I've developed those concepts to consider openness, accountability, a real sharing of how projects are taking place here at the local level. When we do those practices, that's practicing peace and not war and its secrecy. It's practicing open democracy. When you do those sort of things at the local level, it simply creates a good neutral space and best practices that I think gives really good examples for countries of the world in the Mideast and the Ukraine in how they can better consider practices of peace and not war. It just gives some good examples. So I think we're doing incredibly important work here at the local level when we work towards openness and accountability. And I think you're trying to practice those skills. And even as we can't maybe quite offer, ceasefire proclamations and accords, we can have a good spirit. We can do good practices here. And that's an important default way to be working towards peace and ceasefire notions in Israel. So thank you for those efforts and continuing those efforts here at the local level. We can really have a good neutral position that offers best practices to all sides at this time. Good luck in those efforts and how we can define concepts of peace and not war.
Thank you. Your time has expired. Our next speaker will be the original draw. You can go ahead.
Yeah, it's interesting to, as you guys deal with transportation and it's seemingly so difficult to provide what, the community needs just to get around and, that we can't provide the homeless with any kind of transportation. But then if people cross the border illegally, they pretty much get anything and everything they want. They get the transportation in a very fast manner. They're not sitting there, waiting for long periods of time. It's very well organized. So I'm just wondering if, people start saying that they're seeking asylum or just, go across the border and come back, if they're going to also get free travel on charter buses. It's interesting to think about, how they are being dropped off at the Iris station and then, a big old charter bus, how cool is that, comes and picks them up and then takes them to another transit center. And it's like, even though they have, directions on how to take, the public transit, which is interesting too, because, children can ride alone. So, that's definitely really safe for them to have, military aged men speaking another language that they don't even know, possibly putting them in danger. But, it's all right because nobody wants to acknowledge any of this stuff. It's kind of like, just turn your head and turn a blind eye to all of the things that are going on. And as soon as somebody brings it up, it's like, even though we're paying for it, right? It's like, it's none of our business what's really happening there. And it'd be one thing, if our communities were actually taken care of, but our communities are suffering on a significant level. And these people don't. These people get fed, 3 meals a day. I mean, the people from the storms in the county of San Diego have to come and beg and plead just for 3 meals a day. It's so interesting how the world works. And when everything is upside down and inside out inverted, and people don't want to acknowledge the elephant in the room, right? And it's like, it's interesting to see how many people are complicit in the human trafficking that's going on right in front of our face.
That concludes the public comments on this item.
Thank you. Do we have any comments from board members? We'll go with Edson first.
Thank you, Chair Shu. I'm just commenting right now about the Losan Amtrak Pacific Surfliner service that connects San Diego and Los Angeles has been partially reinstated. During peak commute each morning and each evening, 2 trains, one northbound and one southbound, pass through San Clemente. During the day, 3 additional trains, both north and southbound, connect Oceanside to Irvine via a bus bridge. Freight continues to operate from approximately 9 p.m. to 4 a.m. So the maximum amount of time necessary can be used to continue shoring up the hillside. The project to restore full service is on schedule, and full service should be restored in late March.
Thank you, Dr. Townsend.
Good morning. I wanted to first extend our thanks and appreciation to SANDAG for working with the region and collaborating with Caltrans on the award for reconnecting communities in our region. We had the award was announced a few days ago and by our CalSTA Secretary of Transportation. And so I wanted to just make this board aware that that award had come to the region and to thank SANDAG for that. Also wanted to mention, as we're coming into better weather in our region, we're going to start up some construction projects again that have been suspended. So you're going to see some work on I-15 northbound, just north of Route 78. We're doing some pavement rehabilitation work up there, and that's going to result in the reduction of 1 lane. So there could be some congestion as you go through the area. Also on Interstate 8 eastbound, we're going to continue our work out there in the Alpine area. So potentially there could be some congestion there. And lastly, we're starting up some work on Interstate 805 to connect the auxiliary lanes across the Governor Drive interchange. So that work is getting underway. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Everett. Anyone else on this side? Anyone on my left? Yes, Will.
Hi, just wanted to applaud the bike rodeo that was hosted at my daughter's school, Sherman Elementary. It was on March 7th, and it was hosted by the Bike Coalition of San Diego County with support from SANDAG's Go by Bike program. The kids learned bike skills and safety, and just like the Youth Transit Pass gives kids the opportunity to experience alternate transit, I thought this was a great program to allow kids to learn how to safely use their bikes, and I just wanted to applaud that.
Thank you, Raphael. Any other board comments? If not, Francisca, I guess we're ready to go to the consent calendar. So moving on to the consent calendar, unless any member of the board would like to pull an item, we can. I think the only item on there is our minutes. So any comments on the consent calendar? If not, I'll entertain the motion to accept the consent calendar. I'm sorry, there's public comments as well. So I'm sorry. So Francisca, do we have any public comments on the consent calendar?
Thank you, Chair. We do have public comment. We'll start with Blair Beekman and then go to the original draw. Blair, you can go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Blair Beekman. I wanted to comment on, you had an item about trafficking, I don't know if trafficking is the right word, but continued shipping patterns between San Diego County and Imperial County. And I wanted to quickly comment that before today's meeting, I was viewing a video on different pavement ideas, and as much as we're thinking of permeable concrete at this time, there's the idea of silicone use in concrete that I think would be of interest to yourselves. That it's a rubberized material that it's a bit different than just permeable concrete that I think offers some interesting choices for our future that actually I think can be used as ways to address light refraction and work as almost like as a way of solar light. And that also, it can be important for the future of roads in Mexico too, as Mexico is an important part of these shipping lanes and shipping channels in our future of goods, shipping goods in our future. And just an overall, again, a thank you, a reminder in the good work that you do with cross-border issues that I think is second to none, that I've been incredibly impressed with. And it's those kind of relationships that for as much as the DRA complains about, the importance that we have to address trafficking issues and other sorts of issues, cross-border issues, having good cross-border relationships just creates important ideas and camaraderie and good concepts that gives good examples to people at our national and international level what best practices are. And it's with those best practices we make better decisions towards peace, towards better.
Thank you. Your time has expired. Our next speaker will be the original draw. You can go ahead.
It definitely is trafficking, Blair. It's human trafficking. So your sustainability freight that you guys want to, I don't even know why you call it sustainable, because it is not sustainable when you're making freight electric and, impeding the actual ability for the transportation of goods, especially when they are not able to travel as far. They're going to have to stop a lot. So, I mean, it's significantly going to impede their ability to do their job. So I don't even know if you're, communicating with these drivers, because I have, and, it's not something that they're, wanting to do or think is a good idea, because not only the weight is going to be affected by that, they're not going to be able to take as many goods, but it, completely changes the way that they're going to even be able to transport these goods with the way that they do it now. It's totally different. And right now, at least they can make sure that goods get to where they need to go. But when you, take away the weight and the amount of time that they can spend driving, they're not going to be able to, get the goods to us. And so it doesn't make sense. I mean, when you guys talk about that, but it makes sense in the fact that, you guys want to severely impede our ability to travel and go as far as we do. But it's very negligent on your behalf to think that this is ever going to be a good idea. And when we do talk about cross-border relations, that is something you should be talking to Mexico about, the invasion on the border, because they are complicit in it as well. And everybody wants to ignore it and act like it's not something that's going on. I mean, it's just very sad to think about that you want to engage with somebody who doesn't want to also acknowledge that fact and do something to help us mitigate it. Instead, it's, there's a flood of people and it's not going to stop. And it's interesting to see how many people ignore that, and you ignore the fact that this is going to significantly impede transport.
Thank you. Your time has expired. That concludes the public comments on this item.
Thank you. Do we have any board members on comments on the consent calendar? If not, we can entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Motion to approve by Edson.
Second.
By Edson and Musgrove. Can we go ahead and vote on that?
I will be voting yes.
Thank you. Since we do have a remote participant, we'll need to do a roll call vote in addition to using the clickers. So I'll go ahead and go through that now. For the San Diego County Regional Airport Authority, Rafael Perez.
Yes.
I'll vote yes.
Thank you. For the City of San Diego, Councilmember Campillo, you've already confirmed your vote was a yes.
Yes.
For the County of San Diego, Supervisor Montgomery Stepp.
Yes.
For East County, Chair Shu.
Yes.
For Metropolitan Transit System, Councilmember Moreno.
Moreno, yes.
For North County Coastal, Councilmember Zito.
Zito, yes.
For North County Inland, Councilmember Musgrove.
Musgrove, aye.
For NCTD, Deputy Mayor Edson.
Yes.
For the Port of San Diego, Job Nelson.
Port, yes.
And South County is absent, so that motion passes unanimously with those members present.
Thank you, Francesca. We'll move on to item number 3. And with Jenny, Kim, Ali, and Ben, we'll provide a quarterly update on the progress of our performance of projects funded through the SANDAG grant programs.
Good morning, members of the Transportation Committee. My name is Benjamin Gembler, and today my colleagues and I will be giving you a quarterly status update on our grant programs. This update reflects the status of awarded projects through the end of last year based on performance and financial reporting. In addition, we'll be presenting information about our watch list projects in response to a request made during the January Transportation Committee meeting. So first, we wanted to give you a brief overview of SANDAG's competitive grant programs. The Transportation Committee has oversight over the programs seen here, except for the Housing Acceleration Grant Program. As you can see, the grants team will be providing updates to you on both Transnet-funded programs and other programs with different funding sources. These grant programs fund projects that provide a broad range of benefits for the San Diego region, impacting areas such as active and specialized transportation, land use, and species and habitat protection. So here you will see the cumulative number of projects under these grant programs. They're arranged into project status categories. As of the end of the quarter, this includes 77 active projects, 3 completed projects, 11 projects on the watch list, and no requested amendments. Our presentation will spotlight several of these projects and will highlight those that are on a program's watch list. So what does it mean to be on a program's watch list? As the name implies, watch list projects those that we are watching closely. These watch list projects are those, that we are watching closely. This could be for reactive reasons, such as a grantee failing to comply with state prevailing wage requirements or reoccurring invoice and reporting issues. And it could also be for proactive reasons, such as a trend we're noticing that may turn into a larger issue or need an amendment or other action. We use the watch list to highlight compliance issues and provide greater transparency to a problem or potential problem that would otherwise not be known by anyone other than the grant program staff and the grantee. Being on a watch list is not a permanent status and does not provide for any punitive actions against a grantee. Projects are removed from the watch list regularly when a grantee makes sufficient progress toward addressing the needed areas of improvement. For issues that take longer to remedy, such as prevailing wage, a grantee may remain on a watch list for some time. In those instances, we provide updates to you each quarter on the steps that are being taken to resolve the issue. You can find these details in the discussion memo in attachment 2. Now we'll provide you with separate details on each program, and I'll turn it over to Kim.
Thank you, Ben. I'm Kim Smith. I'm a senior regional planner here, and I manage our Transnet Environmental Mitigation Program, or EMP. And just as a little reminder, the EMP Land Management Program provides land managers with funding to help maintain and enhance the integrity of our regional preserve system, as well as to protect endangered species and their habitats. And for this quarter, as you can see, we've got 22 projects that are still active. We've got 1 completed project, and we have 1 project that's on our watch list. It's the San Diego Audubon Society's Silverwood Anistine project. And this was put on the watch list about 1.5 years ago due to labor compliance issues. The project is actually complete, and we just heard back that within this month from the Department of Industrial Relations that they have completed their investigation. And so we're really just waiting for formal closeout documentation from the DIR to be able to close out that contract. Next slide. So for our project showcase, we'd like to highlight one of our active grant projects. And on the screen, this is our Earth Discovery Institute. It's the El Monte Preserve Bat Hotel project, which is located in eastern San Diego County. The goal of this grant project was to aid in the recovery of locally declining bat species by creating a thermally stable long-term roost site, or what we refer to as a bat hotel on the preserve. In addition, this grant, they engaged and educated the public about the ecological importance and conservation value of bats, both online and through an in-person educational event. And on the screen above you, this is one of their public events that they had where they're using a handheld bat monitor to look at what different species are on their preserve. So now I'll turn it over to my colleague, Ali Vasquez, to discuss the Specialized Transportation Grant Program.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ali Vasquez, and I monitor the active grantees we have for the Specialized Transportation Grant Program. And the STGP administers FTA Section 5310 and Transnet Senior Mini Grant program, and the program funds innovative transportation service programs for older adults and people with disabilities. So during this quarter, we had 40 active grant projects, and 2 of those were completed, and we had 7 on the watch list, and that included some of our vehicle grantees. I'll go ahead and read off the first one. The first one was actually our mobility management grants from FACT. Those were missing key deliverables in their reports. And our Section 5310 vehicle grants, Jewish Family Service, MTS, and San Diego Center for the Blind, they were on the watch list because they were operating under our 20-hour service minimum for their vehicles. And then San Ysidro Health was on the watch list for late quarterly progress reports. And the Section 5310 operating grants that we have, City of Vista was the one that was on the watch list for that, and they are on the watch list because of low spending and low trip counts. So all of these grants are aware, the grantees are aware that they are on the watch list, and they have made progress on completing the deliverables in their scopes to comply after this warning. And I also wanted to let you all know there is a letter in our quarterly report to you all regarding one of our grantees, St. Madeleine Sophie Center, which is our Cycle 11 and Cycle 11 supplemental awardee, and they had received over $100,000 in FTA funding, but they would like to decline these funds due to a cash match price increase out of the control of both SANDAG and St. Madeleine Sophie Center. And these funds that they're declining will be reinvested into the program as a whole, so increasing the Cycle 13 call for projects amount for STGP. Next slide, please. And here's our project showcase. Here's City of Vista, our operating grantee that I spoke to you about previously. And this is a group of seniors going to the City of Vista Senior Center on one of our grant-funded vehicles.
All right, so I want to talk to you about the Active Transportation Grant Program, or the ATGP. This program funds our local jurisdiction efforts to increase walking and biking in the region and transit use. The program is funded primarily by the Transit Extension Ordinance. At the end of the reporting period, we had 2 current projects, and one of those was on the watch list. So our watch list project is the City of Carlsbad. Their project should be about 82% complete based on the current expiration date. However, the city just completed their 60% design in November, and they've indicated they're going to be requesting another time extension sometime this year. The project received about $1 million back in late 2015 to design and construct pedestrian and bicycle improvements at the Carlsbad and Tamarack intersection. The city has received 2 prior amendments to the project already, which extended it an additional 6 years beyond the termination date. And this amendment will come to you and the Transmet Independent Taxpayer Oversight Committee for consideration once we receive it from the city. This is a picture of the City of Santee's Prospect Avenue and Mesa Road intersection improvement projects. This project was completed back in November. The picture here you can see is when they were doing the final paving. The project is complete now. They're taking it to City Council this month to file for acceptance, and the notice of completion will be issued to the contractor, and we'll be able to close that out. Our other project or program is the Smart Growth Incentive Program. This is also a program for our local jurisdictions. This funds infrastructure improvements and planning activities that support smart growth and transit-oriented development. At the end of the reporting period, we had 12 active projects, and 2 of those were on the watch list. In terms of our watch list projects, the City of San Diego's Downtown Mobility Cycleway Improvement Project is on the watch list, similar to Kim's for labor compliance issues. The city filed a complaint against their contractor with the DIR last August, and they've got a case assignment from the DIR, and the DIR is investigating. So once that investigation is complete, the DIR is going to notify the city, and then we'll be able to close out that project. The other project on the watch list, the City of Escondido's General Plan Amendments and Environmental Review Project, is on the watch list. This one's proactive. The city has had a critical loss of staffing in their planning department, and right now they don't have any resources to be able to work on this project. So nothing has been started since the grant was awarded in late 2022. This project is going to amend their general plan safety element and to create a new environmental justice element. So they've indicated they're going to be requesting an amendment similar to the one on the active transportation program. As soon as I receive that amendment from them, we'll be bringing that to ITOC and to this committee for consideration. And another pretty close to completed project, this is the City of San Diego's downtown wayfinding signage. So this project's right around our area here. This grant was awarded in the beginning of 2019. It was about $220,000 to put in signage to help provide direction to a lot of the key landmarks that are here in downtown. And so they will be completing this project probably later this month or an early part of next month, and we'll be starting closeout of that activity as well. And I'll turn things back to Ben.
Thank you, Jenny. I am the program manager for Access for All grant program. AFA funds projects and programs that expand on-demand wheelchair accessible vehicle or WAVE service in San Diego County for individuals with disabilities whose needs cannot be met by conventional paratransit and transit. During this last quarter, there was one active project, which has been providing service since June of 2023. This project, Ride Fact Now, is run by FACT, or Facilitating Access to Coordinated Transportation, who received full funding during the first cycle of Access for All. Ride Fact Now provides on-demand regional wave service for individuals with disabilities. As of the end of 2023, the project has provided over 6,800 trips to disabled individuals needing transportation in San Diego County. This picture shows a disabled rider being assisted into one of FACT's wheelchair accessible vehicles. So that concludes our presentation this morning, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have. I'll turn it back over to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you. We can take the public comments for now.
Thank you, Chair. We'll go to Blair Beekman first, who will be followed by the original draw.
Hi, Blair Beekman. Thanks a lot for this item. It seems this is an item that offers a sense of good accountability practices and upkeep. Thank you. With the flood things happening in San Diego and the Tijuana River Valley area a few months ago now, there was a SANDAG member from either National City or Chula Vista a few months ago who very nicely spoke of the need for, reporting of what exactly was the weather conditions like on the day of the flood and other such items to help better understand why the flood actually took place. That was really nice of her to say. And to me, it gave a sense that it could be a shared community effort in understanding those future reports that she can receive. We have to be when we have disasters take place, we have to be accountable in what has happened and what is happening. And I think you're trying to do that with this sort of item. You're trying to prepare ourselves and prep ourselves. Thank you. We also, as a part of that accountability process, it's an important reminder, I think, that we have to build our future to not be, creating disaster situations in order to receive new grant dollars. It's an uncomfortable subject to mention, but it needs to be said at some point, just so we're clear with each other that we continue practices to not harm each other as community and as government to community. And it's painful to offer that, but it's a learning lesson. And we learn, if we say it out loud to each other and practice it together, we do it less and less in the future. And that's an important goal. If it needs to be said here, I hope it can help. And good luck how we can address our future.
Thank you. Your time has expired. Our next speaker will be the original draw. You can go ahead.
Yeah, when we're dealing with the seniors and disabled and getting them the transportation that they need, there's been people that have called in, whether it be seniors or somebody who is disabled, and saying that, just being able to access these rides has been difficult, or the, rules and regulations or what allows them to ride has kept them from being able to, even though they can't go ride other transit. So we need to be mindful and make sure that we're providing it to the people that is needed and making sure that they have access to the information, and it's not something they have to go searching for, making it harder for them and making, to get to where they need to go. And anytime we're talking about environmental mitigation, it's really hard to listen to you guys talk about that, because you put things up like Wi-Fi and, you're using all of this green infrastructure and technology that is actually really detrimental to the human health through radiation and, these lithium bombs that you're putting people in. And as we are engaging in getting more and more of this, type of things coming into the community, we're not even mitigating the fact that these start fires that can't be put out. And it is actually, damaging to the environment to be mining for lithium and cobalt and all of those things. And they have children doing it. It's so hard to listen to people who sit and say on one hand that they want to protect health of the people and protect the environment, but then everything you're doing goes against that, because you don't acknowledge the fact that this is actually a danger to the public health and to the environment by pushing all of this infrastructure. And what happens when, China has basically a monopoly and provides all of this infrastructure, when they decide that they don't want to provide it anymore, it's going to leave everybody in a very, a huge bind. And, so we don't mitigate the things in time. You wait till after the fact.
That concludes the public comments on this item.
Thank you. Do we have any member comments or questions? Let's start with Vice Chair Zito.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for the presentation. It's nice to have even just a review of all of the great work that the agency is doing through these grants. So it's nice to be able to see that as well. I just have a request with respect to future times this comes back for the items on the watch list. One, it's not really clear in the staff report when they were put on the watch list. So if in the future we could just add a line item when they're going to put on the watch list. And then two, for items that it's possible or it makes sense, it'd be great to have the agency, not the agency, but the recipient provide an expected time frame when they think they're going to get things resolved. So for ones that are, the ones that are involved with, the minimum wage requirements and they're waiting for an outside agency, clearly they're just going to have to wait for an outside agency, and that's fine. But for the ones that they have report requirements or they're supposed to file an extension for something like that, they should be asked, when do you expect to have that in by? And we can see that in the report. Thanks.
Supervisor Commissioner.
Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you for this presentation. Appreciate the update. I just had one quick question, and that was around whether or not there are requirements for any of the contractors or awardees to do business with DBEs or WBEs, disadvantaged business entities, women-owned businesses, anything like that. I saw the prevailing wage requirements and the DIR and all of those things. Just wondering if there's any additional requirement around DBE businesses.
Yeah, right now we don't have DBE requirements in any of the programs. The only one that's federally funded that could be applicable is the Section 5310 that Ally manages. The trouble with that program, we've looked at setting goals on it, is that there's not a lot of DBEs that provide vehicles or that do the service that is really what's contracted out, but it's something we continue to look at each cycle when we work on a call to see if it's there. The rest of the programs don't have any specific mandates for use of either DBEs or small businesses.
Okay, so it sounds like we have a requirement for the program that has the least amount of availability of DBEs, and then no requirement for some of the other programs that may have more availability of DBEs.
Possibly, yes. And we can't, by California, and Betsy, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe we can set a DBE goal on a non-federally funded procurement. I think it has an issue with state law, but if we wanted to do small business or other programs that.
Yeah, disadvantages is not there's no race or gender there. So I don't think it's prohibited, but it sounds like a conversation that maybe we can have offline. Thank you so much.
Just very briefly, Chair, thank you.
Okay.
Some of the entities that are behind on their grants compliance, are any of them close to being in default? Or is an expectation they will all be able to recover from the best laid plans to remain in compliance?
I would say I can speak for my program, and no, none of them are going to default or anything like that. They're just a little behind in their deliverables and may need extensions to help them pursue improvement. Yeah.
And when I say we, I mean SANDAG as an entity are working very closely with the recipients to ensure that they are going to be able to succeed in their mission. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Any other comments?
In regards to the active transportation grant program, the item that's on the watch list, the city of Carlsbad, when was that grant originally provided?
It was November of 2015.
Wow, so it's
been a
almost
while.
10 years.
Correct.
So I guess a question I would have for this body is, at what point is it too long? Right? Like at what point, I mean, the money's already spent in this case, right? But so here, let me ask this. Are there others that are almost 10 years old?
No.
No, this is an outlier.
This is an outlier here. And they haven't spent the entire grant, so they only get reimbursed as they're meeting deliverables. So they've been paid through their 60% design. I'd have to check, but I want to say maybe half of that grant is still there, because predominantly it's to fund construction of that parcel, which is going to cost, the most amount of money. So when that amendment comes, that's an option. You don't have to consider that. You can terminate the grant. They could be paid, for what they have done, and then kind of let them decide how they want to move forward on it.
Well, I remember many years ago as a city staffer to then council member David Alvarez, I was being lobbied by SANDAG staff because the city of San Diego had so much transit money just sitting in our coffers, I think at the tune of over $100 million. Obviously, this is a very different scenario, but same kind of situation here where we're just sitting on money essentially. So I think the city of San Diego is doing a really good job now at spending their Transnet funding. So obviously we have our leader here, our chair. So I'll just leave that on the table, and just hopefully maybe one day we could have a conversation about that, because I know that there are many, many, many projects in my community that would love to have that funding. So thank you. And is this an informational item, or do you need a motion?
This is just information.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Any other comments or questions? But I'd like to follow up on what Councilmember Moreno brought up, which is the issue of grants in which we may have paid for planning portion, but then the recipient never goes through with the construction portion. Is there any recourse in that kind of situation, or we've reimbursed much of the grant, but the applicant, the recipient never really follows through with the project for a variety of reasons, maybe very good reasons?
So we monitor them for their project scope. So in this case, for Carlsbad, they're required to deliver the entire project through completion. So we would monitor them and make sure that they're completing that and bring that information to you. If it's a project that we're only funding planning and not the capital, really where we would note it is in the performance measures. And when we go and we look back at projects and see how they've progressed, you know, what did that turn into? But it might be, for some of these projects, it might be several years. Like a smart growth project, we might not see, you know, further changes in the area. So it sort of depends on that particular project and what we've been funding them to do.
Yeah, and I think having some kind of resolution for these projects that keep on hanging on, I think it is something that maybe we should pursue. The other part is for projects that either don't complete it or not completed on time, or the performance is poor. Does the applicant receive any kind of, I guess, less priority in the next cycle, or any kind of marks in that regard?
So the only program right now that has a past performance adjustment is the STGP program. We don't have it in the other programs yet. It's something that we're starting to collect all of that information. And as we bring a call for projects to you, if you wanted to put a restriction on there and say, we want to look at past performance and consider it, it's something that we could turn on at any point on any of these grant programs, and it would affect those projects moving forward.
And I think sometimes it may not be part of the point, various competitive grant programs, there's a point system. So I don't even know if it needs to be one of the negative points that we brought up. That may be pretty punitive to a city. But I think it would be worth noting to the applicant, by the way, you're applying for this, but there's a few projects that you still haven't completed yet. And I think the public needs to know that as well. So I think that's really important. Any other comments?
Real quick, when I managed Homeland Security grants, we had subrecipients, 9 of them in total. And if we had one of them that was either non-compliant or ultimately decided against, we could reappropriate those funds to another subrecipient as long as they met the specific guidelines for the original application. Is that something SANDAG can do? And not specific to Carlsbad situation, but if it lingers on.
Yeah, the way that the policy is today is that if there's a grantee that forfeits, if they terminate early, then those funds, depending on the timing of it, we'll either look at who was on the last call and on the project list that would have received funding, and we'll keep funding down that list. Or if we're close to doing another call, then we'll roll those funding over and then give it out through that. So it sort of depends, but yes, that way the funding isn't lost.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just make a quick last comment. You know, it's really nice to know all the accomplishments of these grant programs. The number of rides from Ride Fact Now, a brand new program, to Baton Hotels, I think are all bits of information that's good for us to know that these grant funds are doing some good in our community, and for the large part, they're successful. They do help a lot. With regards to smart growth projects, I think in the future, it'd be nice to have some data, and that, I don't know if it's part of the grant program itself, or it may be something that SANDAG in its analysis has some assessment of how effective smart growth projects do. So I know if they help commerce and businesses many times, as well as transportation and safer transportation in a particular area. So that may be a separate look at when we talk about smart growth. Did we really do the smart thing And because we did that smart thing, do we have some good stories and data to show for that? It's a assessment thing that I think we can look at in the future. But thank you for a great report. It's nice to have these quarterly reports, and I look forward to reports soon. Another report in another quarter. So next we have item 4, which actually Jenny gets to stay there. We'll be presenting the Active Transportation Program Cycle 7 call for projects.
All right, so let me switch gears. I'm here to talk to you. So I do oversee all of the grant programs, but I'm also the program manager for the statewide. This is the California Active Transportation Program, or the ATP. So I want to talk to you about what that program is and what's coming up for it. So the ATP is a discretionary grant program. It's managed by the California Transportation Commission. So this is not one of SANDAG's grant programs specifically. The program funds projects that encourage active modes of transportation, increase safety for bicyclists and pedestrians, reduce GHG emissions, and enhance public health. The program also has a really strong focus on ensuring that disadvantaged communities are represented. So there's a lot of entities that are eligible for funding through this program. So it's cities, Caltrans, the transit agencies, schools and school districts, tribal governments, and also agencies like SANDAG can apply. So we've held 6 cycles of the regional ATP, starting with cycle 1 in 2014 and concluding with the most recent cycle, or cycle 6 in 2022. The cycle numbers, years, and award amounts are shown on this slide, which demonstrates an overall investment of over $138 million directly to our region since the program began. Last cycle, you'll notice there's a significantly larger amount of funding that was available to the region, and this was because of the state budget surplus, and they added general funds into the program to supplement it because it's really oversubscribed. You'll notice on the pie chart on the right that the majority of the funding, or about 98%, has been awarded to those infrastructure projects, and I'm going to discuss the reason for this a little bit later in the presentation. So there's $568 million in funding that's available in this upcoming cycle. The funding is distributed through 3 separate components that are shown on this slide, and the ones that are green and blue are the ones that are applicable to our region. So first is a statewide component. This distributes 50% of the funding, and all the applicants across the state compete for funding, and there's evaluators across the state that review those applications. Projects that are not funded through the statewide component then compete again in either the small urban and rural, so that pinkish one, or the regional one that's green. For the larger regions in the state, like ours, 40% of that funding is distributed through the MPO of the region to handle that secondary competitive process. So that's the reason why we have a role here. The amount of funding that's available for each region is determined by the population, and our region was allocated about $20 million through this upcoming cycle. So this is the timeline for the first piece. This is the statewide call. The CTC is expected to adopt their guidelines and their fund estimate at their meeting next week, and this will allow for the release of the call for projects. The CTC will announce the funding recommendations, the staff recommendations, in November, and then the final adoption is expected to occur in December at the CTC's meeting. On the regional side, we started the process last month with a discussion of the criteria that we used in the prior cycle, and we took this to the Sustainable Communities Working Group. And the feedback I received from today's presentation, I'm going to share and use to inform the criteria for the upcoming cycle. So the draft is coming back to you again for full consideration at your meeting next month, so in April, and the CTC will then be asked to adopt our criteria and the remaining sort of how we do the process at their meeting in June. In July, we'll open the call for projects and accept applications until September. And then any projects that weren't selected for funding through the statewide call will get combined with those that we receive through the regional piece. And then we'll start that evaluation process in this fall. And then next March, the funding recommendations will come back to you and the board, and the CTC will be asked to adopt our funding recommendations at their meeting next June. So it's kind of a long timeline, as you can see on here. There's 3 different types of eligible projects. There's infrastructure, non-infrastructure, and plans. Infrastructure projects are capital projects such as new or improved sidewalks, bike infrastructure, and applicants can request funding for any phase of that project. So it can be design, it can be environmental, it can be right-of-way, or it can be the full construction or a combination. On the non-infrastructure side, these are projects that are education and encouragement programs that are either complementary to an infrastructure project, or they can be a standalone program. And then plans, this is kind of a mouthful. They are community-wide bike, pedestrian, safe routes to school, or active transportation plans that encompass, or they are predominantly located in a disadvantaged community. So these can't be, broad plans. They have to be focused on a disadvantaged community. It's important to note that the CTC guidelines limit the amount of funding that can be provided to plans to 2% of the overall award amount available. So that's the reason why that slice of that pie earlier in the presentation is really, really small. The CTC guidelines also require that all 3 project types and all project sizes compete for the same amount of funding, which means there's no set aside for each of these different types or the project sizes. And we'll go through the specific categories next on how they do compete and how they're evaluated. So the majority of the applications that we received are those infrastructure projects. So these are the criteria that we use the most in determining which projects receive funding. So this is the criteria that we used last cycle, and the changes that we're considering to be made are criteria 3, 6, and 9. So under criteria 3, this is the area we're considering to make the most changes. We're working with our regional planning team to integrate the work that they're doing on the regional Vision Zero action plan and pushing that through our criteria so that projects located in areas that have systemic risk factors that already have or could lead to a high number of serious injuries or fatalities would receive more points. We could also provide more points for projects that have elements that are proven to reduce serious injuries or fatalities, so either using the FHWA guidance or NACTO's all ages and abilities. Under criteria 6, the scores could be driven by the California Healthy Places Index, which would provide that those points are driven basically by data, and it would help ensure consistency across the evaluators in that criteria. And then lastly, for criteria 9, we're interested in reducing the number of points possible in this category, so that percentage, since most of our grantees or our awardees do not have a lot of matching funds, as we know. Other changes that we're going to be making are putting a table with each of these criteria that shows exactly how those points are awarded. So this will help provide for more uniformity across our evaluators, and it provides greater transparency back to the application or to the applicant about the composition of their final project score. So at the Sustainable Communities Working Group last month, committee members suggested changes kind of similar to what I've talked about already. And they also suggested that we increase the criteria 1, that demand analysis. And these are points that look at the actual project location. So the population, car ownership, things like that. And yesterday, I took it to the Mobility Working Group. They were supportive of the suggested changes, and they also asked if we could give points to projects that improve multiple modes or that develop complete corridors. Committee members also wanted to see more emphasis placed on the benefit that a community would receive, including improvements in locations that are not a disadvantaged community specifically, but the disadvantaged communities would receive greater access to as a result of the proposed improvements or project. So this slide has the criteria for those non-infrastructure projects. These are those education and encouragement projects. Historically, we haven't received a lot of applications in this category. And the reason that is that a lot of this work is more beneficial if it's combined with the actual construction of a project and kind of help do those two things at the same time. So we don't usually see a lot of applications standalone. When we do see them combined with an infrastructure project, that infrastructure criteria is used because the majority of the project cost is going to be for that actual capital portion of the project and not as much for the non-infrastructure. So on this section, we're not really proposing any substantive changes, but we did get a comment yesterday at Mobility Working Group to remove criteria 6, the innovation, because it's not really very applicable here and it's hard to be innovative in this area. So that's something that we're looking into doing. And then similar to the infrastructure criteria, we'll have this table under each of those that develops how each of those points would be awarded so that everybody has better guidance about what that looks like. And then lastly, this is the criteria for plans. The weights and scores here are pretty similar to what's in the non-infrastructure. So any changes that we make onto those criteria, we would probably want to make onto these. As mentioned previously, the CTC guidelines limit the amount of funding that we can award in this category to 2%. So because of this, we don't typically receive a lot of applications in this category either, but potentially we would see some this cycle. So today's presentation is just to give you an overview or a refresher on what the ATP is, talk about the proposed changes that we're considering, and get your feedback on criteria or anything else that you'd like to see in the call for projects. You're welcome to contact me through the end of the month as I'm kind of forming this. And as I said, it will be coming back to you, the final set, with a comparison of all the changes from prior cycle to this cycle, and I'll bring that next month. And if you're wondering, we usually get about 25 to 30 applications in this program. It's kind of a lot. So if you know somebody who's interested in being an evaluator, you're welcome to share my contact information. I'm always looking for folks that would like to serve in that capacity. And this concludes my presentation. I'll turn things back over to the chair.
Thank you, Jade. Do we have any public comments on this item?
Thank you. We'll start with Blair Beekman and then go to the original draw. Blair, you can go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Blair Beekman. Thanks a lot for this item. A reminder with grant funding issues and you know, when people are asking for grant money for projects, say like bridging the digital divide, it's not just bridging the digital divide and supplying a whole bunch of new broadband in local neighborhoods and the future of tribal areas. It's that the process of placing the new technology is also an open and accountable process. And that's creating a more holistic picture of sustainability, basically, and best practices. So tech accountability is a really important component to the future of bridging the digital divide. Look for how you can do those things for broadband suppliers to offer a good notification, a clear notification process to the public when they're installing new installations, new broadband towers and placement. Those sort of concepts are important. And yeah, always with grant funding and the importance of projects asking for money, always look for the whole picture of how a project needs help and support and accountability guidelines, civil rights, civil protections. Really look for an organic picture of what is sustainability and not just specific needs. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be the original draw. You can go ahead.
It's interesting to see your cycle 6 and it's got 61.9 million. And then just before that, it was 16 million. And you're talking about, you know, a surplus in, you know, the state budget, but we're in a deficit and it's set to be significant. And, you know, the state's already taken away money from, you know, the regional plan to, you know, from a lot of projects. Some of them, you know, have no money in them. So when we're sitting here and talking like this, it seems dangerous to be, you know, planning for things when we have such a huge deficit that we're facing. It's interesting that you would get that much more in cycle 6 when we're facing that. But when you're talking about educate and encouragement, it's just interesting because I think, are you doing that because, you know, you need people to engage in this type of, transit, whether it be biking and walking or public transit. And, when you are engaging with people and educating them, you're telling them a bunch of propaganda as to why, you want to push this, because your climate god is what rules over you guys. And it, dictates all of these things, but it's all a facade. And so you're not even educating them, you're indoctrinating them into believing and trying to change their behaviors, because that's the way you guys talk, into, doing this new way of living. And, when you do usually, go and engage with people, you don't really reach that many people and you spend a whole lot of money doing it. So, it just seems, like you guys just got to listen to the way you do things. You shouldn't have to change behaviors or encourage things. If people want to do it, they should be able to, but you're doing it because you're trying to push this upon us. It's not about like something that the people want and they've been asking for. This is a United Nations agenda and you guys are complicit in it.
That concludes the public comments.
Thank you, Francesca. Do we have any member comments or questions? We'll start with Vice Chair Vizero.
Thanks, Jenny. Exciting times. Looking forward to all the great projects that we'll be able to review and hopefully complete. Yeah, just some comments on, I guess, riffing off what the chair started out with last time. Clearly prior results are not included in the current evaluation, and also relative to his comments, I don't think I'd want to be punitive from the perspective of if one project goes south that happens to be a current project that harms an agency. But I do think over time we should be looking at, I don't think this has happened so far, but if there were a single entity or a single agency that has ongoing problems with producing results with these grants, I would want to know that, right? And it should be factored in if there's like someone that was an actual problem or troublemaker, and maybe that can be considered somehow when it's brought up, or, if that could weigh in, if it was a recurring ongoing problem. But just because there's a one-off, I don't think it would be very useful to have that part of it. The other one, I liked the comment that you got from the mobility group of, if there's, a project that's dealing with multiple modes or complete quarters. I think that's a pretty good input. The one other input that I had was, I sit on a board for a water treatment facility, and is very successful in getting grants for recycled water and those types of projects. But one of the criteria that is often viewed favorably there is when agencies or entities collaborate together. And I don't know if something like that's been considered, if you have a multiple agency or a multiple entity application, that would be viewed more, as a possible benefit as well, just showing that it's providing a even greater regional benefit by doing that. Thanks.
Councilmember Moreno.
Thank you. And I'm afraid to say I don't know as much about ATPs as I wish I did. I have a few questions. Number one, are ATPs, what is the percentage of ATPs that are applied to by jurisdictions as opposed to nonprofits?
So pretty much all the projects we get are local jurisdictions, because you have to have a master agreement with Caltrans to accept that funding, and it kind of limits that anybody else would. If we see nonprofits or communities that are interested, usually we try and match make them with that local agency to get projects funded. And they have been really successful in the past. It's just making that connection that the community may not know how to get something implemented. So we do try to help with that connection so that they can be successful and the project can get implemented.
Got you. So nonprofits cannot apply.
Correct.
Okay. And I've seen this in my district. I mean, we had a Casa Familiar with the cultural corridor in San Isidro, and I've had several entities, mainly schools, reach out to me, because I did hear the Safe Routes to School, which was really popular about a decade ago, and I really haven't heard a lot lately. But I could see why they essentially can't apply themselves, and they would need the city to give them, they need a godfather essentially to help them reach the next part of life, I should say. But okay, thank you. Thank you, you've enlightened me.
Yeah, Safe Routes to School rolled into this program, which is why you haven't seen it. So it's tucked up underneath, and it's typical. A lot of the projects that we do see besides like city projects are Safe Routes to School. They score very, very well. So that's where you'll see those kind of come. If you have some in your area that are schools that need infrastructure or changes, that's typically how we do that, because they aren't always aware that the Safe Routes to School program isn't standalone anymore. It got pushed into this.
Oh, that's nice. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. And thank you, Chair.
Let's continue with the city of San Diego with Councilman Capillo.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much, Ms. Russo, for the presentation and for the explanations. A question about the sizing of individual awards. Am I right? It's a minimum of 250,000 for an infrastructure project?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a maximum amount that is planned to be set? My concern is if you have a few projects that are very, very, very high, it depletes the funding quickly. Is there a maximum contemplated?
There isn't a max. This has been talked about statewide, even on the statewide call, and the CTC does not want to limit it. There isn't a prohibition yet in the guidelines, but it's a question that I've asked them to try and help. How would you mitigate, one entity taking a large amount of the funding? And I'm trying to get a response back from them to see if it can help us here.
Okay, so we can't. Are you saying we can't set a maximum ourselves?
We know sort of anecdotally that they frown upon it. So we could put one in. Whether they would approve it in June, I don't know. So I'm trying to get that clarified.
Now I understand exactly what you're saying. Another question, a term that was used in the section about contingency projects doesn't seem to be defined in the glossary, average application score. It wasn't defined. What is that going to be?
It's a typo. So it should be total application score.
Okay, very good. Yes, understood that was defined. Okay, excellent. Really appreciate the update, and if I have any further questions, I'll reach out.
Rafael.
Yeah, my question is just, disadvantaged communities have historically been underinvested and require an extra push for an equitable outcome. I saw that in the criteria for plans, disadvantaged communities get 10%. But in everything else, it was 5. So I'm just wondering why in that section it was able to be higher as opposed to the rest where it's only 5.
It's probably just balancing. So all the categories have to have the same number of points. So they compete equally, and trying to shuffle between the different ones to get it to match. But I can look at it and try and get that consistent across all of them.
Okay. Yeah. And I just once again reiterate that for equitable outcomes, any extra push in that area would be more equitable.
Sure.
Any other comments or questions from board members? I have a few. So, Jenny, do you know what's the projected consequences of the state budget affecting this? Are we going to still get 67 million or?
I do. So this program, with the exception of last cycle, does not get funding from the general fund. It's all formula funding from the federal government, from FHWA, or it's SB1 funding. So what's in there, it's basically resetting this cycle. That's why it seems like there's a dip. It's putting it back to the funding that they have. So it's not affected by this state budget at all. Future cycles, potentially, there was a commitment that was made by Newsom in the prior cycle to put more funding in the program. That's why you saw that balloon in last cycle, and that was all general fund that was added to it. That's the part that's in question right now, is how do you sustain that, because the demand in here is so high. But this funding is preserved. It's not going anywhere. This cycle is exactly what you're going to see coming out of it, and it's not subject to the state budget cuts at all.
Right. And with other state funds, aren't all state funds, state-funded projects still require SEQA review as well as compliance with discrimination and other policies of the state?
Yes.
So even though we may not be encouraging certain minority type-owned businesses or other groups, they do still have to comply with the other rules of the state.
Correct.
And then this is a considerable jump from the funding that we've had in this program from before. What was the total number of grant applications, if you can pull that out of your head, for the last cycle? How many requests did we receive in the past?
It's usually, I want to say, about double of the funding that we have. Last year, because we had that 60 million, it was probably more than that. I mean, it's way oversubscribed in the number of applicants that we received. But that said, with that much funding last year, we were able to fund a lot deeper into that list. So I would predict we'll probably see around the same 25, 30 or so applications in here, but the project sizes have gone dramatically larger because the improvements that are being done and inflation is in there. So it's hard to predict what we would fund, but probably not a lot because $20 million isn't going to spread very far.
Right. And again, I'm always interested in assessment tools, so I hope we do that. The suggestions you received earlier with regards to dealing with things like not having the criteria for innovation, I think is a good one, as well as making having projects that have helping multiple modes, multiple active transportation modes. It's great. But I'm always interested in assessment or show of the project, whatever the project is, that the applicant also shows that, hey, we've done this before and it's been very successful, or the demand is very high, as well as the comment on having multiple agencies involved. So a project that is showing collaboration with the various agencies and jurisdictions is great. I think that's another criteria that's helpful. So it may be adjoining Caltrans property, maybe adjoining another city, and this helps make that transportation system work well. So any other questions or comments? If not, we can move on to the next item. Thank you very much, Jenny. So our next item is number 5, draft FY 2024 Transnet triennial performance audit, and we have Chair Franco from the Independent Taxpayers Oversight Committee, often known as ITOC, along with our external auditors, Kathy, Randy, and our SANDAG Grace Pack. And so Grace Pack, and our SANDAG CFO, Andre.
Thank you so much, Chair Hsu, and good morning. Again, my name is Jonathan Frankel, and I have the pleasure of chairing the Independent Taxpayer Oversight Committee, or ITOC, here at SANDAG. For those of you not familiar with the ITOC, the committee was created by voters as part of the 2008 Transnet Extension Ordinance. And the purpose of our committee is to provide an enhanced level of accountability and oversight of the expenditure of Transnet funds. The principal way we do that is through the triennial performance audit process. So this is a very lengthy, very important process for us as a committee. Again, by way of background, the committee is comprised of 7 members. All of us are volunteers. We have professional experience in a wide variety of areas. Myself in real estate and land economics, including traffic engineering, CEO and private sector, amongst a number of other professionals. So our auditors are here today, and they're going to run through a number of key findings of the audit. But before they do that, and this is a very dense report, it's took us over a year to create, it's 200 pages of information. Before they do that, I wanted, if you'll indulge me, to provide a brief analogy, which I believe articulates the kind of key finding and challenges associated with the delivery of Transnet projects as was envisioned in the 2008 ordinance. So imagine you are a newlywed, and you and your spouse are excited to start your life, and you're looking forward to buying a home and having children. And fortunately for you, your parents have planned well, and they've set aside money for you to buy this house, to support your down payment. But like many parents, there are some conditions associated with this money. And they tell you, we're happy to give you this money, but we have 3 conditions for you. Firstly, we believe your future children would be better served by buying a home in a particular school district. And we've chosen 3. And so the house you buy needs to be in this area. Secondly, they believe that your family would be better served financially by buying a single family home because there's greater chance for appreciation in the future. And thirdly, they also live locally and they want to be close to you and your family and your future grandkids. And they say, we're going to draw a boundary around a particular community, and you need to live within this area. So you excited, you say, thank you very much. I'm going to accept this money with these conditions. And now, of course, you need to go finance the remaining balance of your purchase. But in this case, instead of going to one mortgage lender, you need to go to 3 different lenders. And you identify these lenders that are going to give you this money. And the first lender says, yes, young man or young woman, we are excited to give you this money. However, we have some conditions associated with this. We are a very sustainability-oriented mortgage company, and we only lend to individuals buying homes in those areas where you have access to transit and you can walk and you can reduce your carbon footprint. And you say to yourself, okay, I also agree with that. My values are aligned. Thank you very much, mortgage lender number 1, I'm taking your money. But you then go to mortgage lender number 2 that says, yes, young man or woman, we will lend you this money. However, we also have some conditions. One of our conditions is that we only lend if you want to buy a townhouse. We do not lend to people who want to buy single family homes. You think to yourself, well, this may be problematic. However, I'm so excited about buying this home. This is a place, everyone needs a home. This is a place for my family to thrive. I'm going to accept this condition and I'm going to move on to lender 3, who then tells you, well, young man, we will give you this money. However, our condition, we also have a condition, and that condition is that we only lend in communities that are historically disadvantaged. We want to remedy, to encourage home ownership in those communities that have been the subject of redlining and other discriminatory housing policies. And you say, okay, that's aligned with my values. I'm going to accept that money. And you sit down with your new wife and you look at all these criteria and you create a matrix. And you very, very quickly realize that these criteria are fundamentally incompatible. However, instead of now going back to mom and dad and telling them, I'm really sorry, when we actually go and look at how we're going to buy this house, these eligibility criteria are fundamentally in conflict. Instead of doing that, what you do is you say, well, let me get creative about this. And let me say, well, I know mom and dad, you wanted me to be in a particular school district, but I can do an interdistrict transfer and I can get my kids into one of those districts. So I think I satisfy those requirements. And instead of saying, well, yeah, we may not technically be a single family house, but only one family lives here. So I think we qualify under these eligibility requirements. I think it's technically single family to me. That's what it means to me. So I meet that. And although it's not within the radius you want, with no traffic at all, it could be 20 minutes. And so I think I satisfy that obligation as well. And so instead of going back to your parents and telling them, you take the money and you buy the property. The Transnet program locally is our down payment on infrastructure finance in the San Diego region. Without it, we could not deliver the over 700 projects and secure and leverage the billions of dollars of funding that we secure for our region for very, very critical projects. And transportation finance works exactly in this analogy as all these mortgage lenders. They have varying requirements. And Transnet, while it's very important, it is a very small part of the overall stack. And so as we look at SB1 funding requirements and their prohibition on capacity inducing or climate inducing impacts, we look at STIP funds, we look at FTA funds, we look at all the different funding sources. What we have is irreconcilable conflicts between all of these sources of funds. And this creates a humongous challenge in delivering the projects that were included in the Transnet ordinance. And so the problem that is identified fundamentally by this audit is there has been a lack of transparency and accountability with respect to fundamentally tracking the status of where these projects are. We need to go, mom and dad in this analogy are the voters. And when the criteria changes, we need to explain to them why the projects have changed, where they have changed, what has gone on, and to update them. The problem is not that these projects have changed, because as complicated as infrastructure finance is, projects will always necessarily change. And if we didn't change them, we would not be successful in securing all of the other funding sources that are very necessary. And so that, in my view, is the fundamental finding of this audit, that we need to do a vastly better job at explaining how, when, and why Transnet ordinance projects, those 48 projects that were approved by voters, are modified. We need to have a clear and consistent process for doing that. And people need to understand when these projects are changing and why they're changing. Finally, I'll also say that the current RTP, the 2021 RTP, does not include many Transnet ordinance projects. And as a result, they are not eligible for funding. And so that is a de facto amendment to the ordinance without actually doing so. You're removing projects from eligibility. They can't receive any funding because they're inconsistent with the RTP. And so we also need to be open and transparent with the public about when something like that occurs, what the effect of that is, so we don't undermine confidence in the program, because I think, and I know staff will speak to the success of the program, I think it is essential for the long-term health of the region to ultimately extend Transnet. And that requires a level of trust and accountability with members of the public as we go back to them and ask them to continue to support the self-help that allows the projects to succeed and allows SANDAG to succeed. So with that, thank you so much for indulging me. I will turn it over to our auditors at Schoberg Eveshank, who can run through some of the more fine-grained details.
Thank you, Jonathan, and good morning, members of the committee. I can only hope that our audit presentation will be as engaging as that, and that you will stick with us, the fine details of the points here. I'm Kathy Brady. I'm with Schoberg Eveshank Consulting. I'm joined with Grace Park. We've lost her tag somewhere along the way. And we're here to present you the fiscal year 2024 Transnet Triennial Performance Audit results. Our firm, Schoberg Eveshank, is based in Sacramento, and we primarily focus on public sector audits and consulting, many of which are in the transportation, Transnet, construction sector. We've been the ITALK performance auditors for, I think this is round 6 for these triennial audits. And every time we look at different things, different focus areas, different questions that the ITALK wants us to look at. One thing that does not change is that we follow government, generally accepted government auditing standards. Those standards require many different things from us, things like demonstrating our competence, objectivity, independence, having evidence for our results. So for the fiscal year 2024 audit, ITALK asked us to focus on 8 general objectives that are shown on this slide here. Each area had a set of questions that we addressed, but for our presentation, we really only want to focus on 4 generally. Basically, it's going to be talking about items 1 through 4 and number 7 on the slide here. And what we're going to do is really focus on what was done in the major corridor projects over the last 3 years, what remains to be complete, and are those, like Jonathan mentioned, are those in the 2021 regional plan? Are there plans in place to fund those projects, and knowing that there are some funding shortfalls, as well as are there prior audit recommendations, have those been addressed over the past audits? As Jonathan alluded to, we found that SANDAG reported progress on many Transnet projects that were done, many more that are planned to be done, but did not clearly link those projects with the Transnet ordinance. So that is the ordinance in place. It was from 2004-05 period. So we're looking to see what was done based on the improvement that was planned and the boundary where it was meant to be done. So there was not that specific link for the ones that were done, nor for the ones that are planned to be done that were in the 2021 regional plan. It was difficult for us to figure out which ones were or were not in there. As Jonathan mentioned, there's funding shortfalls, legislation, external funding eligibility criteria, some of his mortgage analogies. That all impacts the projects that can be completed and planned, and those changes are allowed by the ordinance. Really, our main point is SANDAG really needs to do better and more fully demonstrate that progress against those specific commitments at that detailed level, scope, boundaries, or explain why different project options were delivered, providing clear and transparent data. So we make several critical and high priority recommendations to address those areas, as well as some recommendations for funding plans and prior audit recommendations that were not addressed. So to go into detail, I'm going to turn it over to Grace.
Thank you, Kathy. So first, we focused on what major corridor projects were completed and attempted to identify how those projects align with the original scope of the improvement, such as adding 2 managed lanes or expanding lanes, as well as the location and the boundary of the improvement, such as between SR 54 and SR 125. And as was a finding in previous years, there was no clear link of the project's scope and boundaries delivered against those original commitments. In other words, a crosswalk had not been developed or maintained. We as auditors attempted to perform this reconciliation or crosswalk ourselves, but we were unable to due to the data we received, which was in many cases inconsistent and unclear. And while SANDAG reported progress and there was some evidence of this progress, we were unable to verify or align the projects delivered with specific ordinance scope and boundary commitments. Now, in past audits, we made recommendations to address this very issue, and they may not have been fully understood. So for this audit, we tried to be a little bit more prescriptive, and as such, we're recommending that as a first step, SANDAG ensures that executive management designates staff to have assigned responsibility for tracking progress against the ordinance plan pledges at that detailed location scope level to demonstrate what actual improvements were made and where. Additionally, we're recommending that SANDAG revamp or create new tools or spreadsheets to document that comprehensive tracking of the major corridor projects delivery against the ordinance commitments, again, for plan scope and location. As a part of this, SANDAG should ensure that the new tool is accurately supported with underlying data such as project fact sheets, budget documents, Google Maps, or other available project data that validate completion as appropriate. As another measure towards increasing transparency and accountability, SANDAG should provide the project details completed against the ordinance to the board and ITALK to use as part of annual budget conversations, as well as for the 2025 regional plan or other future regional plans. That communication could include a detailed listing or highlights of those original Transnet project boundaries and scopes that were not completed as planned. We understand that recently in January 2024, SANDAG staff did provide to the board a presentation on the 2025 regional plan initial concept that included which Transnet major corridor projects would not be completed as initially planned. This is definitely a step in the right direction, but SANDAG needs to include information to show the board exactly how each project's scope, boundary, and location has changed versus just stating that the project will not be completed as initially planned. And finally, for this section, SANDAG should also update data in its Transnet dashboard or some other alternative public-facing system designated in place of the dashboard on a monthly basis to ensure that there's up-to-date cost data, schedule data, and status information that's comprehensively available for both current and progress projects, as well as previous major corridor projects already completed. The previous functionality of the dashboard that was in place during the last triennial performance audit in 2021 came much closer to addressing this need versus the current dashboard in place during our audit period. Next slide, please. Okay. Similar to the projects that have been completed, we wanted to also identify the remaining Transnet projects left to complete and compare those to the projects authorized in the 2021 regional plan. Similarly, because there's no clear link of project scope and boundaries delivered against ordinance commitments, as shown in the previous slides, the status of the remaining Transnet major corridor projects is also unclear. And this too was a repeat finding from prior audits. Now, echoing what Jonathan, Kathy have been saying, we realize that project changes are normal and expected in transportation planning, especially over long periods of time. And additional legislative and funding restrictions have changed the nature of projects that MPOs have to deliver and include in regional plans. And there's strong pressure and statewide targets to reduce VMT and GHG emission. These combined laws and strategies all impact remaining Transnet projects. Yet, while MPOs like SANDAG have the flexibility to plan projects that best address regional needs within that legislative constrained framework
and the ordinance allows for such changes, communicating those adjustments clearly to ITALK, the board, and the public is crucial for accountability and transparency. And so similar to report section 1, we're recommending that SANDAG take action to, number 1, ensure executive leadership assigns priority to these recommendations. 2, specifically track the remaining ordinance project boundaries and scope against those in the regional plans. And finally, clearly show and communicate to the board, ITALK, and the public which ordinance project scopes and locations are not going to be done. Next slide. All right. Another factor affecting the future types of projects to be completed centers around funding and how projected shortfalls impact future delivery of the major corridor projects. The audit found some positive highlights, including some strengthened cost estimation and escalation methodologies. We saw generally conservative revenue projections that considered historical performance, both efforts that show SANDAG's dedication to accurately plan for both the cost and the revenue side. SANDAG also created a focused internal team to pursue external funding and leverage ordinance funds. In fact, between 2019 and 2023, SANDAG secured $1.2 billion in non-transnet funding. SANDAG also invested funds into developing comprehensive multimodal corridor plans that made SANDAG eligible to receive significant grant funds that otherwise would not have been eligible to receive. For one example, it spent approximately $27 million and it received a $103 million grant for a transnet project, which is good news. But while these efforts are good, they're not enough to address the $6.5 billion shortfall as of February 2023 for major corridors. The highest risk of not being delivered lies with future projects forecasted in the Transnet Plan of Finance that are scheduled in fiscal year 27 or beyond that have not yet started. Now, SANDAG still has not determined a plan to address this shortfall comprehensively, which is another repeat finding from the fiscal year 21 triennial performance audit. Moreover, the audit found that there was no established or vetted methodology to reprioritize transit projects comprehensively against the limited funding that is available. SANDAG staff described to us a process it has and employs for selecting projects for inclusion in its RTIP, some factors it considers in deciding which projects get funding when money is available, and uses some new tools to track near-term funding needs, expiring funds, and high-priority projects, which are all good efforts. But when we reviewed examples of this reprioritization in practice, the funding decisions didn't always clearly follow that described methodology. In speaking with staff, they had rationale for some of the decisions and why they appeared to be out of alignment with their described practices. But for a taxpayer-funded program, this reprioritization methodology and process should be vetted, transparent, and clearly communicated so that constituents know exactly why some projects are moving forward with receipt of funding while others are not. So the recommendations for this section focus on SANDAG presenting the details of its Transnet Plan of Finance with specific amounts for the shortfall, timelines, and what impact it has to project delivery. This includes developing and discussing specific options, again with timelines, on action steps to address the shortfall and determining a formal and vetted methodology for reprioritizing projects. Next slide, okay. Relatedly, another area that we focused on was the status of prior audit recommendations and ordinance amendments. Specifically, we set out to answer the question of whether SANDAG had implemented corrective actions, if they've done so in a timely manner, if there are delays, what was the cause, and whether SANDAG was efficient in implementing related ordinance amendments. We've already mentioned ad nauseum, there were some repeat audit findings with prior recommendations not being implemented. In those areas previously mentioned and other areas, we found that SANDAG had not taken strong enough action with more than 40% of prior audit recommendations that remain outstanding since the fiscal year 2015 audit. That is roughly about 28 of the 70 prior audit recommendations outstanding, many of which were identified as critical or high priority in previous audits. Looking at this slide, you can see that there were a few lingering recommendations from the fiscal year 15 audit, but with most of the outstanding items being from the fiscal year 18 and 21 audits. Although there was certainly progress on some of the prior audit recommendations, we want to give credit for those. For example, areas such as the bike EAP delivery scope against the ordinance, regional safety planning, EMP monitoring, and SANDAG's performance measurement system with its focus on safety and movement towards a Vision Zero action plan. Additionally, we wanted to highlight that the one red not implemented recommendation from the 21 audit related to ITALK member service limits that SANDAG and ITALK both chose not to implement after much consideration. When we looked at what recommendations remained outstanding and why they weren't addressed, we found that SANDAG's related actions didn't always align with the recommendation or underlying finding. They followed good practice and used a formal tracker with clearly assigned owners, actions, targeted completion dates, which are good practices. But there were instances where SANDAG seemed to not understand the intent behind the underlying recommendation. For instance, one recommendation related to transit routes, but SANDAG's reported action discussed pavement and streetlights. In another example related to estimating the impact of permit delays on bike EAP projects for the board, SANDAG's reported action talked about bike replacement staff and communication of bike status, but not about the impact of the delays. In speaking with staff, staff cited turnover and changing responsibilities as some struggles with implementing the prior audit recommendations. And we did see that SANDAG's reported turnover figures seemed higher than industry rates reported. We also found that the ordinance amendment process was slow and had not occurred. In fact, half of the 10 proposed amendments related to prior audit findings. In addition to the needed amendments to align the ordinance with projects already authorized and approved in the current fiscal year 21 regional plan. Thus, we made recommendations for SANDAG to establish stronger and specific executive sponsorship to lead SANDAG's efforts, to address the audit recommendations, and to make ordinance amendments as needed to demonstrate accountability. Now I'll turn it back to Kathy.
Thanks, Grace. So in addition to these areas, we do have other areas of focus in the audit report. Move this over. For instance, Section 5 talks about smart growth grants, a topic we had earlier today. We reviewed 16 grants that were closed during our 3-year audit period that were awarded to 7 different jurisdictions. And we looked to see if they spent the funds on intended purposes and if they had intended outcomes that related to the smart growth program. We found they did both. There was limited data available to measure performance outcomes. But we did verify that they added bike lanes and sidewalks. We looked at some plans. They weren't all capital projects. Some plans, such as a Greenway master plan, that actually resulted in some subsequent construction. We also reviewed SANDAG's monitoring efforts, and there were efforts in place, as Jenny referred to some of them earlier. But we do make recommendations to strengthen the monitoring, as you can see here, to verify the grant deliverables, to conduct those regular site visits at all of the various awardees, and to capture and report on performance outcomes. So those are starting to be in some of the next cycle grants. So hopefully that data will be available to report back to everyone. Next slide. Other areas we looked at were some non-major corridor projects. You can see our attempt at a fancy little graphic here. We looked at the street and road improvements that were reported, as well as some bike improvements reported. So we did not audit these. It's a lot of data that comes in from the local jurisdictions, but you can see that there's potholes being repaired, there's bridge retrofits, there's ADA curbs being put in place. So a lot of activity. Many bike lanes were added, still many more to go from the bike EAP program. Some of the other non-major corridor improvements that we looked at related to the transit routes and some enhanced frequencies for bus rapid transit and trolley. And while those were in place, some of them have not yet been put into the frequency that was expected in the ordinance, primarily because of funding shortages, or maybe a related capital improvement project is not in place yet. The other area that we look at every time, ITALK has us look at themselves as well to compare and see if they're fulfilling their responsibilities. And we found that, yes, they do. They continue to do that. They're meeting their bylaws, their statement of understanding that's in the ordinance, and they really do perform well against other similar taxpayer oversight committees in the Western United States that we look at. Next slide. So that's just a quick snapshot. As Jonathan mentioned, it's a long, dense report because we look at a lot of areas and a lot of data. We presented earlier this week on Wednesday the report to ITALK. So we're here before you today, March 15th, for the draft report. Per the ordinance, the draft report must be given to the Transportation Committee at least 60 days before its final adoption to review and resolve any inconsistencies or technical issues with the draft report. So this is our period of waiting. Once that 60-day period ends, we'll make any necessary revisions and finalize the report by May 24th. That final report will be presented back to ITALK June 12th, and then ITALK will deliver the report to the board on June 21st. Next slide. So that concludes our presentation. We really do want to thank everybody. The audit is a big lift, not just for us, but for those involved. And we take up a lot of staff time, not just at SANDAG, but Caltrans and MTS and NCTD, all the local jurisdictions, the ITALK Audit Subcommittee. Everyone is very cooperative, open, sharing many, many documents with us. So we thank everybody, as well as your time for the staff and for the ITALK Audit Subcommittee. So we're here to answer any questions. I think first we'll hear from Andre about SANDAG's response to the audit recommendations.
Yes, good morning, committee members. Thank you, Kathy. On behalf of our management team, I appreciate the opportunity to respond to the fiscal year 2024 triennial audit. I'd first of all like to start off by thanking the entire Schoberg team, Kathy, Grace, for their devotion and professionalism in working with our staff, interviewing over 30 staff members over the last several months to prepare this audit. So as Kathy mentioned earlier, this is our 6th triennial report going back to 2008. And we're actually fortunate to have Kathy lead this effort all those years. Although we put this audit out to bid, Schoberg has won it every single time. And I think we have gained from the experience and the continuity on this program. Now, before I get into the management response, I just want to note that we are celebrating the 35th year anniversary of Transit this year, a program that has been very successful and has substantially grown since the inception. I actually performed the first financial audit of the commission in 1989 when I was an auditor with KPMG. That first year, the annual revenues were $95 million. This last year, Transit brought in $430 million to implement regional and priority projects, a growth of 450%. Transit One collected a total of $3 billion, and since 2008, Transit Two has generated $4.5 billion to date and has been vital in helping us secure additional federal and state and local funds. For example, our fiscal year 24 program budget is $1.2 billion. Federal, state, and other local funds make up 77% of the budget. Transit makes up 23% and helps us leverage a lot of the state and federal funds that we receive, such as the $1 billion that we received in the FFGA for the Mid-Coast Trolley Project. I think Grace just mentioned the $1.2 billion that we recently received as well. Now, as Chair Frankel also mentioned, Transit is a down payment. The ordinance actually requires us to have at least a 1-to-1 ratio. In other words, $1 of transit is supposed to attract $1 of outside funds. But as of the close of fiscal year 2023, the leverage has been 2.62 times. And to this fiscal year to date, we are currently at 2.85 times. Now, annually, about half of the transit revenue is passed to the local jurisdictions and the transit operators for local streets and roads and transit service improvements, including operations and supporting capital improvements. Working with our partners at the Caltrans, MTS, and NCTD, we have delivered over 700 projects to our communities. And you just presented the last item, Jenny and her team, the importance of the other programs, such as the grant programs that are really important to our region. Also, I just wanted to remind you that this is a performance audit, not a financial audit. And the Commission has had clean, unqualified audit opinions for the last 34 years in a row, with the highest AAA ratings from both S&P and Fitch. This is something that we are really proud of because only 5% of municipalities throughout the country have two AAA rated ratings. But as successful as we have been in leveraging for outside funds, delivering projects throughout the region, clean financial reports and the highest ratings, we do have some administrative duties that need to be followed up on. In Appendix D of Schoberg's report, or attachment 2, is a 9-page document of management's formal response, along with a proposed action plan for implementing the recommendations. Schoberg's report was broken down into 5 main sections, and our responses are listed by priority, from critical, high, medium, low for each recommendation. I do not plan to go over each of those recommendations in my oral report today, but we can certainly do that if any committee member desires. Rather, I plan to address management's overall approach and how we intend to move forward to address all the recommendations. Now, our finance group is responsible for coordinating at least 20 different types of audits on an annual basis, including these fiscal audits, performance audits, our compliance audits and reviews, and agreed upon procedures, including this triennial audit. This list does not include the annual ongoing audits and investigations by OIPA, or SANDAG's independent performance audit group. Generally, each of these audits or reviews has a lead staff or member or point of contact. But with the triennial, because of the breadth and depth of the performance and the number of staff inputs from the various departments and divisions that are involved, that has not really been the case, but we intend to change that. The Solberg team mentioned several times in the report today of having an executive sponsor. Colleen Clemenson, our CEO, has asked me to take the lead on behalf of our executive team. I'm currently responsible for 2 departments, the accounting and finance team and the financial planning team that is here in this chart in front of you. The financial planning team has the budgets team, the grants team, the financial strategy and programming, and the capital office team. Each one of these teams is led by a manager. Now, SANDAG is committed to improving the transparency, delivering on our commitments into the region, and ensuring the financial integrity of the transit program. Thus, we are proposing to add a new division, the transit program. The staff member will be the official point person to lead, coordinate, and respond to all Transnet program queries, including this triennial performance audit. The staff member will also lead the Transit Steering Committee to ensure that all divisions and departments responsible for responding to audit recommendations are completed in a timely manner. As you can see in the circular diagram here on the right, almost all of SANDAG's departments will be included in the steering committee, including the regional planning team, the informational technology team, the visual communications, engineering construction, just to name a few. One of the first duties of the staff member will also be to identify and implement the software to make sure project status and underlying information is consistent and transparent. This will ensure that details on scope and location boundaries are also included in future informational products so that the public and board have clear visibility into implementation of the program and remaining projects. SANDAG is committed to refocusing resources to monitor and report on the status of the transit program and to respond to current and prior audit recommendation. This slide shows a proposed response timeline for some key dates. If you focus on the upper section of the timeline, just this week we posted our fiscal year 2025 draft budget to our website, and is now open to review for our funding agencies and public comment. Over the next couple of months, we will move from the draft to the final budget, and we'll be funding for these efforts, specifically for the new staff member, position along with the time anticipated for the steering committee and for the software. These will be included in the final fiscal year 25 annual program budget, and pending budget approval by the board, we will be able to move forward with our plan in July of this year. Staff is currently developing an Excel spreadsheet to track past, current, and future projects against the transit ordinance now. And by July of next year, we'll have enhancements to our website for increased transparency. And by the following July, we expect to have implemented the new project management software for the future. Looking at the bottom half of the timeline, later this year, the plan of finance will be presented to the ITALC and to the board. And once the regional plan is released, we'll provide the documentation on the alignments of the 2025 regional plan and the transit ordinance. So SANDAG will continue to have clear and detailed discussions on how best to deliver transit projects consistent with current laws and requirements through ongoing discussions on the regional plan and future plans of finance. Over this 2-year period, we plan to address all the audit recommendations, and we will report back on a quarterly basis with updates as to the progress that we have made. We'll incorporate these updates in our current quarterly finance report and an update on the financial markets, which is presented to the ITALC and board on a quarterly basis. I am confident, based on these changes discussed today, we'll be in much better shape by the next triennial audit review in 2027, with the ultimate goal of being accountable, transparent, and enhancing efficiency. With that, Chair, that concludes my report, and staff and I are available for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Andre. I believe Colleen had some comments she wanted to add.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I just wanted to really zero in on, first of all, thanking Chair Frankel for your dedication and leadership on the ITALC. It's a super important role. We know it's a voluntary role that you take on, and really appreciate that. And this is such a clear audit. So thank you to the auditors for your diligence in pulling this together. And I think this just really points to the importance with what Andre wrapped up with in terms of accountability, transparency, and efficiency. And while we have this longer timeline for reporting out, I'm asking the team to look at things that we can do now. So what's in the current Transnet ordinance, what has been completed, what's left to do, so that you have that, as the auditors call it, a crosswalk. The second thing that I wanted to make very clear, as we're developing this team that will exist within, under the CFO, the Transnet funds have a 2% set aside for administrative work. What I've asked the team to do is use those funds. Right now in our draft budget, those are allocated to other things, slim down. So we're not adding to our budget as a result of this. What Andre said is that we're repurposing so that we make sure we fully fund this unit, so that we are truly tracking and very accountable to every single dollar that we're spending in Transnet. So I just wanted to reiterate that for you all. When you start to see new positions being added, it's not about growing the agency, it's repurposing within the agency that we can focus on our accountability and our efficiency. And that's something that I've really taken on in my role as CEO, is really focusing on that. So just wanted to wrap up with that, and I'll turn it back to the chair.
Thank you. Let's see if there's any public comments first.
Thank you, Chair. We do have 2 public comments. We'll go to the original draw first, followed by Blair Beekman.
I appreciate your anecdote, Jonathan. That was really well explaining kind of what happens. And I think that it's important to, understand. I mean, this is proving that, when the public comes and says, things aren't going the way they should be and could be. And, it's just proof in that. And it's just interesting to, when you guys since 2015, you've had outstanding, critical changes that you haven't made. And I feel like when, somebody comes and brings light to it, and then it comes to the public, is when you guys want to do something. It's just like with the toll road It took somebody having to be fired and exposing it to the press that, got people to, you guys to start moving and making changes. But, when you sit here and you say that you're going to do it, why weren't you doing it in the first place? And it leaves no hope that, when you guys have these projects, that you're doing what needs to be done to implement them. But it part of that is getting in your own way by, and even the state getting in your way by everything always changing. So, I mean, if all of the policies, procedures, and all of the requirements continually change, you can never get to the end of the project because you're always having to mitigate it in between. But you guys are also negligent in the way that you decide to handle things. And so, I mean, I feel like you guys create committees and all of this stuff to then do the work that you were supposed to do. And so you have all of these committees and different entities that are dealing with like the things that should be done from the people that were in the previous committee before. I don't know, whatever. So it's good to hear all of these things because it's proving that what we know is true, but it's just really sad to see that I don't see any end in sight.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Blair Beekman. You can go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Thanks a lot for this item. You've had two items today that really try to address the concepts of accountability, which I think is an important subject here in San Diego at this time with the future of grant issues and funding issues. So thank you for your two items today. To try to learn how to speak in good terms, the city of Oakland has made a real commitment to a concept called a love life philosophy, which I feel can include the concepts of how government and community work together to make decisions with the specific intention to not harm each other. And that, if you think about it, is actually a pretty noble goal to work towards. And yet, they're putting it in writing how to work towards that goal. I hope we can make those same sort of commitments down here in San Diego. I think when we do at the local level, we create a standard of practices and decision-making that creates an important standard of peace and open democracy and just care in how we make our decisions as a community process. It is impossible to work towards those sort of goals. We really can't do it. And so the ideas of accountability and openness go a long way towards that process and public oversight. I think those are three important factors that you're trying to address here. And thank you for that. And good luck how we can continue in those sort of good efforts. We can build a really peaceful, sustainable future. We have to take the steps to work how to do that. It's the local level that is best in how to do that. We then give good examples to our national and international levels so they can practice peace as well. Thank you.
That concludes the public comments on this item.
Thank you, Francesca. Do we have any comments, questions from our committee members? Maybe I'll start this way with Vice Chair Zito.
Okay, yeah, thanks. I'll start by also thanking Chair Frankel for your service and commitment, as well as all the other members of the ITALK committee. I think it's fair to say that the organization and the region is better off for your capable, knowledgeable, and very diligently working hands, and I truly appreciate that. First, I have a question for just staff. I think it's implied, but I don't actually think and it was written in the staff report, but I don't think I heard it verbalized. It sounded like staff has agreed to and aligned with all of the recommendations. That is the case, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so, and I appreciate that. And I also want to thank staff. And again, the format looks very familiar to me, being on the audit committee where you've actually lined them all out and put names and dates. That's awesome. So thank you for getting that done. But going back to your analogy, Chair Frankel, I do think it could use a little bit of evolvement. I really appreciated it, just to show the complication that we're in here in the sense of where we can get ourselves in trouble. Specifically, if you consider there's two parents and two, say, family members involved, 4 people, I would say the parental requirements of the initial down payment, they could go forward and say, yes, there's home ownership is a long time. Raising a family is a long time. So we understand requirements may change over time. So we're amenable to requirements, but it takes 3 of the 4 of us to vote approval for a change in those requirements. However, when you go out and seek funding and want to actually get one of those mortgages, only 2 of us have to approve that. So, you can actually add new requirements with only 2 people voting for that. But yet, if you want to change the original requirements, it takes 3. And to my point, I do think this is something that maybe needs to be brought up a little bit and figured out how to be talked about as we go through this process, that modifying the Transnet ordinance requires a supermajority, but adopting a regional plan only requires a straight majority, and making sure that the board understands the ramifications of that and what we need to do about it. Because I don't even know personally, I can't even elaborate and talk about what happens if those things, two things don't align, and could use some help with a little bit of information there. A little bit, just again, for the auditors, I think this was mentioned in the report, and I've been involved with SANDAG for a while, but perhaps maybe not long enough. But there was a discussion in the report that original ordinance had some lockbox projects which had to be done. And it looks like it said they are, and they can't be modified. But there's also a lot of discussion in the report about how it's difficult to say, since things are piecemealed, exactly what may be done or what may not be done. But just for total clarity, we're all aligned that the lockbox projects are done and they're finished, and that part's good. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful. The one other comment that I just had along that was just that I agree that it's very difficult to figure out how to communicate all of this clearly in a way to be effective and transparent. And I'm looking forward to any ideas and suggestions, improvements that get put forward. I do agree with the comment about the reprioritization being challenging. I think that on staff, to back up staff, it's pretty clear. We get the RTIP brought before us and it says, well, this is where we're putting funding now, but it's, and we should be able to internalize what that means from a priority perspective. But, a lot of us are busy and have a lot of things on our plate, and it gets difficult to suss that out. So anything that can be done from the perspective of saying, okay, this is how the funding shifted around, this is why it shifted around, this is where we heard on board meetings about why money's moved here and moved from over there, would be helpful, just because we're all busy and it becomes difficult to suss that out if you're not always fully engaged every moment of every meeting. So, but I do know that our tip is, that's where we're putting the money. So that's clearly our priorities. But being able to suss out some of the background of how we got there before it's right in front of us would be helpful as well. Thanks.
Anyone else on this side? Councilman Musgrove.
Well, Chair Frankel, I love your parable, but we need to be very mindful that parents extended that loan for specific purposes. And while the kids ran off and explored and found other options and ventures, the economics for the parents have changed over time. So when the kids come back and say, we need an extension because look at all the great things we did, the reflection will always be, well, this was not the intended or the intention of the loan. So that line of communication, updating, explanation is extremely critical. Always mindful that the economics and situation for the parents may have changed, and that money may not be there, and they may not be able to extend and continue that credit line. So if we're going to speak from the 10,000 foot level, my good friend Dave Zito brought it down a little more into scale, but I look at it from a little higher point where that argument needs to be made at some point and coming up on us very quickly. If we intend to continue this, there has to be a lot of communication starting yesterday with where we were, where we are now, and where we want to be, and what it will cost to keep that line of credit moving. And again, thank you for a great presentation for everyone here. Thank you.
Anyone else on the side? Yes, ma'am.
I would like to thank Mr. Frankel as well, and the whole ITALK committee. As was mentioned, we do recognize that you're a volunteer board or a committee, and we appreciate the work that you are doing on behalf of taxpayers, right? Thank you to management for agreeing. I am the chair of the city audit, so I know that sometimes it can be difficult to get management to agree, and I thank you for that. It is concerning that this was brought up, I think, for the past 6 years, having the oversight, administrative oversight by management was brought up in previous audits. Is that correct?
It was a previous audit finding, not so much the oversight of it, but that crosswalk that we're calling wasn't done.
Okay, and it was over 3 years ago?
Yeah, the audits are every 3 years. So it would have been with the fiscal year 2021 audit was really when the first set of recommendations were made.
Okay, well, I too share some of the concerns that were brought up as well. I think that we need to be open and transparent. And when we're not going to do something, we need to share and explain why we're not going to do something. And I'm a true believer of making sure that we follow through with our audits. And I look forward to Andre watching this with a fine tooth comb and making sure that we adhere to our what we say we're going to do, right? Also, just a side note, I was an internal ISO certifier when I was a broker buyer in the metal industry. I was an internal auditor. So it's very important that we follow through with what we say we're going to do. So I appreciate your time, and I appreciate the audit, which is it's a very good audit. So thank you for that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Moreno. And also on this side, Supervisor Montgomery-Stepp.
Thank you so much, Chair. I'll be brief. Really appreciate the presentation and management response. And Mr. Frankel, all of the work that ITALK does, as was mentioned here, but I think it deserves another mention. I just, there are quite a few things that are, pretty glaring that we all understand needs work. Colleen, you went over kind of a plan of how to address these things. So I'm very appreciative of that. But I want to reiterate just the communication piece. So it's a really tough job of SANDAG to go through all of the different layers of regulation, rules, procedures. But I think that certainly is a part of the job. And once we get on track of getting all this information together, I think the next step is to be able to clearly communicate it, not to the public out there, but to committee members and board members. I certainly could be the only one on the dais, but it's often very hard to really read through the packages and understand, especially from having a stint at SANDAG and then going away and coming back, right? And I think that that's one of the biggest challenges that we face. And I would just suggest that this is where the larger members of the public really can help us communicate. Not even the folks that we have relationships with that are also in this world, but people, like if I were to have to explain this to my mother, how would I do that? Like she's smart, but she's certainly not in these meetings, and I think that maybe from that lens, it would really help us all a lot to understand not only where we are, but where we need to go. And then being transparent, how we communicate that message to each other and then to the public. So I just wanted to add that to the conversation. It's been mentioned, but I think it's just as important as getting the information together because the way we communicate that is the organization, the agency depends on it, I think. So thank you again.
Thank you. Any committee members from this side? Yes, please, Sharon.
I wanted to just thank the auditors for including the analysis of the shortfall in the 8.1% for transit operations for all of the transit funded transit projects. This was something that was a conversation earlier. I would like to fact check if 2035 is the actual year because we do have an MOU with SANDAG and NCTD that incorporates an earlier date for the loss of those funds to the operators. But it's also something that's instructive to all of you as board members because as you contemplate how to find funding for other projects, new projects that are not Transnet projects, and you think of things like CMAQ and other types of funding that SANDAG has access to and appropriates to different projects, that you should contemplate, I think, those existing investments from Transnet. So for instance, would you fund a brand new shuttle service somewhere, or would you prefer to keep the Mid-Coast trolley operations running? So I'm glad they're highlighting it now. It is something that needs to be brought up to the, I believe, the board level and the elected officials level, rather than just kind of sitting in the staff discussions.
Any other questions? Let's go with Edson first.
Yes, I'd just like to echo the comments that were made by Sharon Cooney. Thank you.
Vice Chair Zio.
Thanks. Yeah, just one additional quick comment. I wanted to make everybody in this committee aware, because not everybody may, because it doesn't come here, but just from the perspective of where we stand on audits and what may be getting done and what may not be getting done. I mean, I appreciate the comment about the quarterly updates, but the Office of the Independent Performance Auditor actually does put out an annual report every year that comes out in July and usually goes to the board at the end of July, that shows the status of all the audit recommendations from all the audits that happen in the agency. And so, for example, the status of the previous triennial performance audits have been there and have been going to the board, and maybe we aren't yelling or screaming loud enough at the various points in time, but you will continue to get those updates, and you will see the status in July of every year at the board level, and people can just go look at the board report for that to see where things are moving and where they aren't. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? I have a short list. Hopefully it won't take us too long. So Andre, can you just give us a quick briefing of the actual breakdown of transit money as far as how much goes to local government for our transportation needs, to our transit operators, and to SANDAG for large projects?
Yeah, I'll ask Susan to go over those numbers with you, Chair.
Good morning. I'm Susan Huntington. I'm SANDAG's Director of Financial Planning, Budgets, and Grants. So it's roughly a third of the annual revenue that comes in that goes to the local jurisdictions for their local streets and roads funding. And then there's also roughly a third goes to the transit operators through either the specialized transportation grant programs or money for operations for their transit operations. And then roughly a third goes into our major corridor and bikeway.
Great, thank you very much. I just wanted to put that out there so that we remind ourselves that Transnet is much more than sometimes all the attention is given to SANDAG's projects and corridor projects. Without SANDAG, our transit operators, MTS, North Coast Transit, would have a very, very difficult time. And we need to be aware of that and be protective of that. And thank you, Sharon, for reminding us of that. And that actually we have a shortfall there and we need to protect that. And the other 1/3 of the funding comes directly to our cities, to our jurisdictions and counties. And I know my city relies on that for repairing potholes, for doing innovative projects, and what we deem as smart growth in each of our cities. So Transnet does a lot, and even though sometimes all the attention are given to these corridor projects and how we may not be doing as well as others. The other is that how much Transnet is leveraged with other funding. It's a requirement, but we do quite well. So these projects are huge because of the federal and state funding that comes with it. In fact, state and federal money may not come if we didn't have this kind of local funding from Transnet. So that's all a plus for Transnet. So Jonathan, that was a great analogy you gave us. It took a little long, but Transnet is very complicated, so it's good. I would only add a little caveat to it. You know, sometimes parents don't get along. Sometimes parents even get divorced. And parents' interpretation of what transit really meant, you know, is different from one person to another. So that happens a lot, and sometimes it's even the information isn't quite correct. So I really appreciate the auditor's comments on how we need more transparency, but maybe SANDAG can do a better job of providing information out as to what our restrictions are and what are the what's really SANDAG doing with these transit monies and what are the restrictions that are given with them. I think that was a very good point within the audit. I think all the auditors did a great job. Thank you, Grace and Kathy, for doing really a good job of pointing out the recommendations and why we needed to make those. And I also want to give appreciation to SANDAG staff for coming up with a plan on how to address it within the budget that we have. It's not asking for additional money, but to having a specific staff to really deal with these recommendations from the audit. And lastly, thank you, Jonathan. Thank you again. It's a volunteer job. The whole ITALK group is great. I am interested, because you live in my city, whether or not your parents had those requirements for you when you bought in. But anyway, thank you, Jonathan. That was really a great presentation and way to start us out. And I'm looking forward to ITALK working on this some more with the auditors and this entire report coming back to the full board, because I think the full board really needs to hear that, because like I said, parents sometimes have different interpretations, sometimes even get a divorce, but we need that information clearly, and the public needs that information as well. So thank you so much. If there aren't any other last comments, that concludes that item. Thank you so much. And with that, I don't think there's anything else. That concludes this meeting, with the exception of my announcement for the next meeting, which is the next Transportation Committee meeting is scheduled for Friday, April 19th at 9 a.m. And we are adjourned. Thank you.